Hello everybody and welcome to this guide to Angel of Death. I'm going to be talking you through what you need to know in order to take on the minion tank role in a 7-man team here. Starting as a minion tank is a great way to learn AoD and should allow you to build up enough experience to let you start taking on other roles, or indeed moving to smaller teams. I'm going to be focusing on explaining the mechanics and how to respond to them. I won't be talking much, if at all, about DPS rotations, but I will say at the start that DPS is hugely important at AoD. The faster you and your team can clear through the phases, the easier the fight gets, and it becomes possible to ignore or completely skip a number of the mechanics. Lots of teams will have DPS requirements for this reason, and if your team is struggling to get consistent kills, then you might want to look at improving your DPS, whether that's through gear upgrades or just rotation improvements. Power creep now makes it relatively easy to find the DPS to make kills comfortable, if not top end, meaning this boss is a lot more accessible than it was. The kills I'm showing here are pretty slow, because we're in a 6-man team with a few learners, but fortunately this means I get to show off some of the mechanics. Similarly, I'm also not going to talk much about gear, but at a minimum you'll want tier 90 weapons, tier 95 curses, Elder Overload salves, and a Ripper Demon. But obviously the more upgrades you throw in from that point, the easier you'll find it. I'd recommend learning this boss with mage or range. It is possible to melee minion tank, but it's a little bit more fiddly, and so probably not what you want to be learning on. Anyway, jumping into the kill. The arena looks like this. As a minion tank, you'll want to start off standing in one of these 4 quadrants. If you're an Umbra, you'll be in the southeast, Glacies in the northeast, Cruor in the northwest, or Fumus in the southwest. I'm tanking Umbra for this kill, so I'm standing down here in the southeast corner. The base will be standing close to the middle of the arena, and they should be ensuring that Nex stays in the middle for the first few phases. Once the kill starts, your responsibility for the first phase is just DPSing Nex. You want to get her health down from 3 million to 2.1 million as quickly as possible to trigger the next phase. Your team will probably be setting up with a natural instinct rotation on a dummy prior to the kill to ensure that they can deal some big damage once the kill starts. I'm not going to cover the details of this here, but it's worth learning at some point if you're not already familiar with this. Next, we'll attack everybody who's in range of her with magic, so pray mage. She'll also hit the base tank with melee, but that's their problem. With experience, you can do a lot of soul splitting during this fight, but be a little bit careful with this while learning, because Nex can hit pretty hard. During this first phase, and indeed also phase 2, Nex will be rotating through 2 special attacks. Once again, if you're dealing good DPS, you should only get the first one of these, and you might skip that one too, but I'll cover both of them here. Her first special is her Elements attack. She will say, "The elements, they call to me," and leap up into the air like this, turning to face one of the 4 quadrants. If you're in the quadrant she's facing, you'll take 3 hits, typeless of 3,500 damage each. You can use some combination of Disruption Shield, Debilitate, Resonance to mitigate the damage from these, but be aware that if Nex hasn't hit 2.1 million yet, then you'll want to keep DPSing through this, so don't keep a shield equipped for too long. It's really important that you make sure you are in your quadrant once this special attack triggers, otherwise Nex will gain a bunch of enrage stacks, which will make your base sad. If you're in one of the 3 quadrants she isn't facing when this special happens, you'll see her summon a Blood Reaver with 50k health. These will walk towards Nex, and when they reach her, they will heal her and damage everybody around based on the health they have remaining when they get her. The easiest way to deal with these is to place some Dominion Mines before the kill. If everybody on the team has them, you can do 1 or 2 sets in each quadrant, which will bring the Reavers low enough to not really be an issue, without anybody needing to spend time hitting them. When placing mines, I drop them on the purple line around about here, so that the Reaver in this quadrant will walk over them on its way into the middle. If most of your team doesn't have mines, then you can just drop a couple of abilities on the Reaver as it moves in to bring it to slightly lower health before it gets to Nex. The second special, if it happens, spawns 3 Shadow Orbs for each player, which will just stay where they land and deal tick damage to anybody who stands on them. If you do get this, then just move out of the way once they spawn, and ideally put them somewhere where they won't cause you too many problems when you're minion luring in the next phase. When Nex hits 2.1 million, she won't take much damage while she's setting up for the next phase, so at this point you can start using weak basic abilities just to build your adrenaline back up. She'll then summon 4 Amalgamations, 1 for each minion. The Amalgamation is the crystal-like thing here. It has 40k health and a bar over it which will slowly fill up. Your job as a minion tank is to kill your Amalgamation before this bar fills. Firstly, move out of the way when it spawns, otherwise you'll take some extra damage. And then once it's spawned, Vuln Bomb the Amalgamation and kill it. Use strong basics and thresholds to make sure it dies in time. And if something goes wrong and you realise you're not going to be able to kill it in time, let your team know so that someone who's not on an Amalgamation, like the base or the chin, can help you kill it. Once your Amalg is dead, the corresponding minion will spawn. They'll have 150k health, or 300k if you didn't kill your Amalgamation in time, which is why it's really important that you do. Your job here is to lure the minion into the right place so that the player taking the chin roll can clear it. But you don't have to hit it yourself, you should just keep on hitting necks. The lure is really straightforward if you get the positioning right, so focus on that. If you want to, the positioning is actually something you can practice in an empty arena beforehand. What you want to do is the following. As my Amalgamation dies, I'm going to move to stand on this spot here. I'm 1 square outside of this green octagon, and I'm standing on the purple line which indicates the diagonal through the middle of the arena. Once the minion spawns, it will target me, as I'm the nearest player. I don't need to provoke it as long as I've got the positioning right. As Umbra tank, I'm going to throw a Vuln Bomb at Umbra, because we want it to die first, but this is specific to Umbra, you don't want to do it for any of the other minions. Once Umbra does spawn and aggroes me, I walk 1 square inwards, which takes me onto this green octagon. I'm now facing the middle of the arena, and I'm still on this diagonal with Umbra behind me. At this point, I surge, and this will take me onto the equivalent square on the opposite diagonal. Umbra will follow me along this diagonal and stop as soon as he is enraged to hit me again, which will be when he's exactly in the middle of the arena, on the same square as Nex. If all the minion tanks have done their jobs correctly, then all 4 minions and Nex will end up on the central tile of the arena, allowing the chin to AoE them all, and make sure all the minions die. Once Umbra reaches the middle, I can move around anywhere within the octagon without affecting Umbra's positioning. I'll need to do this to deal with some upcoming mechanics, but it's really important that I don't move outside the octagon at this point. If I do move outside, Umbra will follow me, and will be dragged out of the middle of the arena, meaning it doesn't die to the chin's AoE attacks, and will slow down the kill. Until your minion dies, you'll be tanking it. Mostly this isn't a big deal, but keep Mage Prey on, watch your health, and be aware that they will occasionally stun you. I use Anticipate just after I've surged to stop the first stun, and then often don't get any more if Umbra dies pretty quickly. It's really important that you don't use Freedom if you do get stunned by this, because you'll need this for another upcoming special attack. With your minion correctly lured into the middle, your focus is back on DPSing Nex. You can go back into an ultimate rotation, and you're trying to get her, first of all from 2.1 million down to 1.8 million. At this point she'll stop using her first 2 specials and switch to her next set. In this kill, because we know we're going a bit slowly, we're deliberately focusing Nex down to 1.8 million before the minion luring, just so we don't get an inconvenient Shadow Orb spec. Then from 1.8 million, you want to continue DPSing her until she hits 600k. During this phase, Nex will use a new set of special attacks. Firstly, North Smoke, East Smoke and Icicles, which will each target a single player. For the smokes, you'll get a message saying Nex draws smoke from the north or east towards you. Shortly after this, a line of blue smoke or fire will appear, running either north to south or east to west through the arena accordingly, lined up with the square you're on at that point. The most important thing here is to avoid killing your team with this, so communicate which smoke you've got, either in voice chat or just by typing N or E in chat, and then move to a suitable position. As North Smoke, you can either drop it right down the middle, on top of Nex, or some way out to the side, but make sure you avoid the square just west of Nex that the base is on, because they'll get upset if you drop a pile of smoke on them. For East Smoke, similarly, avoid the middle because that's where the base is. Just drop it out of the way of wherever people are DPSing from. The Icicle attack is a little bit more complicated. You'll see a message about ice forming around your feet. At this point, call that you've got ice so that those around you know, because it will damage a few squares around you. You'll be bound in place, and then a few seconds later you'll see your character become surrounded by icicles. You need to freedom to clear the bind, which is why we don't use it to deal with minion stuns, and then once the icicle has appeared, use a power burst of acceleration, followed by dive, to escape the ice area. Your abilities, including surge and dive, will be reset once the icicle lands, so it's important you don't use the power burst until after this has happened. Nex's other special in this phase is the smoke pool. Nex will announce this by saying, "Even I cannot control the element of smoke." This will spawn a ring or a pool of smoke which looks like this. If nobody triggers the pool, then after a while it will deal just over 5k to each player in a 7-man team. However, this can be avoided by a number of players going into the pool. A crystal will appear in the pool, and clicking this instead of just letting the attack trigger deals 14k damage spread between the players in the pool, but doesn't deal any to everybody else. It's important to communicate with your team about this. Sometimes you'll just ignore the pool and tank the damage, but the base may well want you to take the pool, in which case you should head into the pool and activate it once a few other players are in. All of these specials will continue repeating until Nex hits 600k health, and all the minions are dead, at which point we move into the final phase of the fight. In the final phase, your job is to kill the 4 pillars around the arena, in order, and then deal the remaining 600k damage to Nex herself. But of course, Nex has a few tricks left up her sleeve to make this challenging. The pillars will become attackable in the order the minions died in. In this kill, we successfully made sure that Umbra died first, so this is the first pillar we go to. Each of the 4 pillars has an associated special attack, which you'll be affected by if Nex is near you. The base will be taking Nex away from the first couple of pillars to try and avoid this. The Umbra special is probably the most annoying. This is why I was volning Umbra earlier, to make sure that this is the first pillar that we can get rid of. Nex will repeatedly place shadow traps underneath players, much like she does in the shadow phase in basic Nex. Keep an eye on the ground and keep moving around to make sure you don't get hit by one. The Glacier special has 2 aspects. Firstly, Nex's magic attacks will bind you if you aren't praying mage, so be a little careful soul splitting if Nex is near you at this point. Secondly, ice will gradually build up, and when this procs, it will stun you and apply a bleed. Just freedom to clear this. Again, it's important that you save freedom for this, so don't use it if you accidentally get bound. Fumus will drain your prayer and overloads. This shouldn't really be an issue, but just keep an eye on both and re-overload or drink prayer potions as needed. She'll also poison you, which is why it's a good idea to be using Elder Overload salves here. Finally, the Cruel special heals Nex on her attacks, but you don't really need to worry about this. The most significant mechanic in this final phase, however, is the bombs. Repeatedly, until the end of the kill, a random player will be marked with the message, "Nex has marked you to take the full force of the elements." You'll get a blue bar like this filling up above your head. When it fills, you'll be insta-killed, unless you're standing in this dome in the middle of the arena. Use dive or surge as needed to get into this dome before the bar fills. Ideally, you want to stay attacking your pillar or Nex for as long as possible, but definitely play this safe while you're learning. Once this procs, you'll get another bar filling up above you, and once this one fills, a bomb will spawn on your position, which will stay there for the remainder of the fight, dealing big damage to anyone who stands in it, if Nex is in range. The positioning of these bombs is hugely important. If you mess this up, you're likely to PK your team and lose the kill. Firstly, absolutely don't put a bomb in the middle of the arena. People will repeatedly have to head here to deal with their insta-kills, and they don't want to get hit by a bomb when they do. Secondly, you don't want to put it in the middle of somewhere people are going to be DPSing from. Safe places to put it are a quadrant for which the pillar is already dead, because people won't be going back there, directly under the pillar you're on, as long as nobody is meleeing it, or just somewhere out of the way between pillars. For the last stretch, when pillars are dead and everybody's back on Nex, just put it anywhere that isn't that quadrant, or of course in the middle. This attack will repeat until Nex is dead. You may get it several times in a row, which will mean you don't get a lot of time DPSing this phase, but don't worry about that. Prioritise not killing your team with bombs. Once all 4 pillars are dead and you've dealt the last 600k damage to Nex, the kill is complete. Congratulations! You will get your own loot pile in the middle of the arena. The common loot isn't anything to write home about, but there's a pretty good chance of your team getting a Codex, which is a really nice chunk of money. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you found this guide useful, and good luck taking on Angel of Death. Thanks for watching, see you for the next video.